a lot of duplication of effort and save a lot of costs. So, you know, we all know that security compliance is costly, and if we can do it for the most part once for the entire federal government, I think it would be an enormous win. So anyway, this is under the CIO Council. It's called FedRAMP. It's left the concept stage, and it has moved on to the implementation stage, where GSA is heading it. But don't think that means that GSA is authorizing for the government. It's more than that. It's the government choosing who's going to authorize in a way that can be leveraged to empower, optionally empower your agencies to use work that's already been done.
Thanks. There's a second part to that question about how do you terminate it? Yeah. How do you turn it off? Decommission.
Yeah. So this is, you guys want to talk? How do you get out of the cloud?
Nobody wanted to answer it, but I was just here. I have an answer.
That's good. That's good.
Well, you know, Brian, I think that is a tough question. I mean, I think that, you know, the reality is that when you put data in the cloud, you should also have your own copy just in case you need to cut your strings, right? I think that as part of that life cycle, that contractor relationship, you need to figure out what your exit strategy is up front. I don't have an obvious answer other than make sure that you have, you know, the data protected elsewhere as well.
Yes.
Part of the answer is I think you never get it back, honestly. So I'm going to start with I know this question is very simplistic but very complex. Let's think about it for a second. Why is cloud computing called cloud computing? Why not enterprise computing? Why not some other term? I think part of, you know, what we're talking about is very strong service level agreements. Is there plans for a template of a service level agreement like you have in commercial law practices that people can follow? Why do we have our data in India or China or other places where it shouldn't be?
So the gentleman was reading my mind, because like I said in my opening remarks, I don't see anything different from how we do enterprise computing as we stand up our capabilities for cloud computing. So that includes things like, how are you going to build a contingency for your data as the system is operated? I mean, you have plans behind all that stuff. The hard question, I think, is really, if you talk about it from a public perspective, is how do you ensure that the data is now a property of yours and not property of the cloud, you know, vendor, I guess is a good way of saying it. Because everything else between that operation is built like any other enterprise operation that you have or you provision or you acquire. So there should be no difference, I believe.
One other thing I would add to that, I actually took your question is how are you ensure that the data that you put in the cloud is properly decommissioned and destroyed?
Exactly right.
And I think that's a very insightful question. Even in the virtual infrastructure that my company runs, with the terabytes of STAN and the 50 ESX servers that we have a major problem of VM bloat. Right? It's so easy to create them. You build tools to try to manage them. I don't have a very good answer for that. We haven't solved that problem in our little microcosm, and I think it's a tremendous problem for cloud infrastructure. What do you do when your information is spread all over a SAN in one country or many countries?
We've heard from cloud vendors before, and probably somebody in the room, that encrypt your data, give it to us, but encrypt it, and there's some wisdom to that. But there's some other approaches. Yes, thanks.
Okay, I'm in the CIO staff Forest Service. We're kind of a smaller agency if you think in terms of departmental, but we're probably spending $100 million a year on data center. And the problem is outstripping us. We're not going to be capable of running something that's getting so damn complex. So we need an alternative. And of course, everybody looking around and saying cloud, and we're saying, well, it's got to be government cloud. But I think if we're a good model, a good example, you got a lot of agencies out there whose risk profile is getting higher and higher, that are the amount of services we're trying to supply, you know, Web 2.0, for instance, and all the data, you can see how it's exploding. We're, right now, we've got a tiger by the tail. So all this about these requirements for what we have to do, well, we're not going to be able to do them. We're not going to be able to comply. So I think the top of this government has got to start seriously getting ready those government cloud services that can you know, get these people out of life rafts and onto some stable ground. That's just the way it feels like to me.
Are you wanting sort of government-wide community services, community clouds that you can use? Okay. So Phil, when will we have these?
So one of the questions, we're talking about cloud security now. I'd love to talk about cloud governance and cloud policy, and the folks who are up here are here because we're really passionate about this stuff. So catch us offline. We see a path, right? Peter's described it, the FedRAMP path, and the path that gets us pretty clearly to a low, easy commercial cloud. And this has already proven the private cloud approach. We can do the private cloud approach, but there's a huge gap in between. And how are we going to tackle that? And I'd love to hear your thoughts on that. Let's move on for now. Go ahead.
One of the things I guess I'm going to go with both gentlemen. Who's actually done a cloud vendor transition? Because my question is, that should be a standard that's set up, because let's suppose they go from HP to someone else. What's your contingency for your agency to continue operating should there be a problem?
I could even answer that in the private cloud perspective. So in fact, when we built the private cloud called RACE in the Department of Defense, we actually did that in partnership with HP. So HP actually was the OEM that built the underlying code that helped us do all those tenets that we talked about, from the rapid provisioning to standing up OEs to managing you know, distribution of those OEs across the infrastructure. We are in the process right now of divorcing ourselves from that capability, so that and it's a technical as well as a governance issue, because they controlled a lot of the licensing strategy that we had originally acquired, but now we're taking that and putting it under the government's control. So it was one in terms of changing contractual agreements that said, I'm going to do this now for the Department of Defense, and two is I'm going to buy this capability from you, but you don't have any ownership of the data or the OEs or the virtual machines and all that stuff. So am I still partnering with these vendors? Of course, because they use the VMware as my virtualization solution set, you know, the orchestration tool sets that are on top of that. That's all still their product line, but I've taken the ownership piece of that away from them. Where initially when we built this out, because of the need, they owned a lot of that. So it is a transition. It's not just technical, it is governance, it is contractual, all those aspects. And by the end of this fiscal year, we'll have converted to now being a government-owned private cloud.
From a government-wide perspective, the federal CIO has set up an interagency standards working group to promote standards that will enable one to, for example, have portability between, interoperability between clouds, portability between clouds. And NIST is taking a leadership role in that. I'm not personally involved. And so the acronym for that is SAJAC. And I can't even tell you what it stands for. I'm sorry.
Okay. There was another question back here? Yes.
So far, we've heard quite a few comments about owning the data. And I guess I would ask a question